later stages, the ability to be able to give quite complex instructions.
Here's the third part of the interview with Jonathan Mosen, with the author of the book about Apple. So, yeah, here it goes. Hey tout le monde, voici la troisième partie de l'entrevue avec Jonathan Mosen sur son balado avec l'auteur du livre sur Apple, qui parle de Apple. Alors, c'est ça que c'est.
Collecting so much data over the years in terms of what
Nous allons écouter cela.
With searches and flight queries and everything else that you would assume would help inform its guidance and the guidance of Google Assistant. Apple's at somewhat of a disadvantage in that regard because it's not a search hub, so the data that it gathers is certainly not as rich as what Google's able to amass.
And your recap of the crisis and the debate around the aftermath of the San Bernardino shooting was really interesting. It did leave me wondering, has the pendulum swung too far? Clearly, this is part of Apple's brand now. We care about your privacy. We don't sell your data. We keep it on device as much as possible. But are the things that can be done suffering as a consequence?
I don't know. What things would you propose could be done that might be suffering?
Really coming back to the comments that you were just talking about in terms of Google Assistant being more capable, for example, because it can use off-device intelligence, searching for things, collecting data and cross-matching in a way that Apple chooses not to do.
Right. There have been a number of stories that have covered how some of the privacy philosophy that permeates the company have impaired its ability to, for example, make the search and recommendations on Apple TV Plus more sophisticated and more in line or in step with Netflix than, say, what it currently is. I don't know that that's a consequence of San Bernardino so much as that's just a philosophy that's so embedded inside the company that it's really hard to shake the company free of that.
Yes.
It would kind of require it becoming on Apple to do something different.
To me, San Bernardino was the trigger in the sense that was when Apple really nailed its colours to the mast and made a badge of honour of its privacy campaign, really.
Yeah. It went public with its position in a way it had never really done so in the past because of the spotlight and attention that was on it at that time. Certainly Jobs had talked about privacy, and that had guided the company in the years that followed in terms of its own position and philosophy on it. But it wasn't until San Bernardino and the moment where Tim Cook had to say, I'm going to take on the U.S. government, that you really see the company have to fully commit to its position in a way that it hadn't done so in the past.
I was delighted to read the derisive tone in which you described the removal of the headphone jack. As a hearing-impaired person who really needed that jack at the time, it was a major frustration and an inconvenience. Who drove that decision? Was that a Johnny Ive decision to ditch the headphone jack? And why do you think they were so committed to it, even though there was quite a lot of opposition to it?
I don't know. I didn't delve into who drove the decision. Obviously, the elimination of the headphone jack itself was directly correlated to the release of AirPods and the promise of those. And those AirPods go back to, and the idea for them go back to the watch and the desire at the time to make the watch something that could replace the iPhone and free people from having to carry their phones around with them. The only way that the designers thought they could do that was if you had some kind of Bluetooth headset that allowed you to listen to music on the go or make phone calls from your wrist.
So a purely self-serving commercial decision to take something as ubiquitous as the headphone jack away to generate demand for a product that they knew was coming in the roadmap.
I don't know. I couldn't tell you whether or not it was totally self-serving or not, or if it just was not part of my reporting.
The headphone jack removal leaked really early, and it leaked from multiple sources. And there are times when I think Apple does this, where it allows leaks to take place to test the waters, to test the public reaction. Do you think that was the case with the headphone jack?
I don't know. I mean, I think you're more attuned to the headphone jack than I think my focus on it was more as it was announced and the reaction to it, but mostly on the AirPods and the story of the AirPods and what that revealed about some of the challenges with product development inside Apple.
Yeah, I mean, there was this real glut of horrible decisions around this time. One thing I don't think was mentioned in the book was the brand-damaging butterfly keyboard on the Mac, and that was a disaster. It had all sorts of consequences in terms of frequent repairs and damage, and then there was the touch bar as well. It seems to be a bit of a low point for the Mac because many professionals really felt betrayed by the direction of travel of the Mac. They've redeemed themselves, of course, with the M1, which is phenomenal hardware. But the Mac really went into a trough for a while there.
Yeah, no, they certainly took it on the chin publicly, and there were a lot of tech reviewers and critics who continue to bang the drum about the quality of that product, namely Joanna Stern at the Wall Street Journal, who did a number of pieces year after year just about the frustrations of Mac customers whose keyboards weren't working. That was a product and a device that became a real sore point for the company during that period.
One perception I get from tech journalists, at least some tech journalists, is they really are reluctant to go too hard on Apple because Apple can be quite vindictive and the repercussions can be quite significant and you can get blacklisted and all those things. Is that real?
Apple is pretty closed off, right? I mean, they operate under this kind of philosophy of corporate omerta, and they don't offer a lot, right? So it's hard for them to take away a lot. They're just so. I understand the reputation that you speak to, but by the same token, it's hard for them to be vindictive when what they offer up is relatively limited to begin with.
Another one that I think you left alone, which was incredibly magnanimous of you, really, was the AirPower. And I think I'm right in saying that this is the only product that Apple has given keynote time to that turned into vaporware. But I guess that speaks to your whole thesis about product development having gone quite off the rails there.
Right. I mean, I don't know that I don't know if it's the only product that they gave airtime to at a keynote that didn't get released, but certainly in some previous reporting, I mean, the problem with the product was the engineering. And the designers had a vision for what they wanted it to be. But as they were making that product, some previous Wall Street Journal reporting they found that it just kept heating anything that they placed on the device, like a hot plate. So if you accidentally let your keys touch it and then picked up your keys, they would be warm to the touch in a way that you could get scorched, not like burned, but I would say this somewhat tongue in cheek. It was a bit fiery, and so they had to abandon the effort as a consequence of the engineering challenges, and it was a real source of internal embarrassment for the team that was working on it.
Yeah, they should have made it compatible with Apple Books and called it Apple Fire.
Amazon probably has a trademark on the fire, right?
Trademark. Right. We read in the tech press that the Siri team is frustrated that they're feeling a bit constrained because of the privacy things that we talked about. You gave a lot of background on the car, and a lot of people in this audience are very interested in this car because if you can appreciate, if you're a blind person and we do get to the point where you've got a car that is truly autonomous, that regulators agree is safe enough to drive itself, that is a colossal game changer for blind people. But it sounds like it's a bit stuck.
It's not just stuck at Apple, right? It's stuck across the board. I think there's been a realization, obviously, that the ambitions for autonomy and full autonomy are not going to be attained anytime in the near future. And then the alarming thing about that is that if you think back in 2015, they were thinking the opposite. They thought that we'd be riding around in autonomous vehicles by 2021. I mean, this was consensus broadly across the valley, not just Apple. Google thought that, and they've really pushed Waymo really, really hard. But Waymo being the leader among anybody who's pursued this has shown that the challenges of it, they're really only operating in an autonomous fashion for customers in Chandler, Arizona, which is a suburb of Phoenix, and this large wide lanes and relatively predictable traffic patterns, and that just speaks to the challenge of what they're trying to do. Most people in that field feel like they're not going to get full autonomy delivered until there's artificial general intelligence, when essentially a machine can can function with the same sophistication as a human brain. And nobody knows when that breakthrough is going to happen.
And I realize that accessibility is not your beat as such, but just a couple of days ago, as we record this, Apple made some announcements about some of the ways that they're using LiDAR in the Pro phones in the next version of iOS, which will be iOS 16, to do things like door detection for blind people. So you'll have a combination of camera and LiDAR technologies that will read signs on doors, detect whether they're open or closed, and how you open them. It occurs to me that because the blind community is so engaged with Apple and willing to give feedback, positive and otherwise, we are a bit of a test bed for these augmented reality glasses. A lot of that technology will find its way in there. What's your perception of that project and how close it is to delivery?
Bloomberg had an interesting report today on that. Mark Gurman reported that the board had recently seen